Hi there, welcome to Diagonal Move. This video is one of those videos in which I talk for 15 minutes about how much I love playing wargames, and in particular print and play wargames. Viewers who have been with me over the last 3-ish years will be well aware that I feature a lot of pre and P wargames on the channel, particularly the Hex and Counter wargames, for all sorts of reasons that I won't go into again here, but they are one of my favourite parts of the hobby. Now, what may not be less obvious from my usual content is that way before I got into the Hex and Counter war games and print and play games at all, was that I used to play, or dabble anyway, in miniatures based wargaming. Now this was on and off over a number of years and always ran into basically a combination of three problems. The first problem was that it was so expensive to play miniatures wargaming. My budget at various times never ever quite reached the extent needed to build a decent army of finely detailed, intricate miniatures in resin, plastic or metal. The other big challenge was always that I never had quite enough time. Let's say I got that army collected, I'd finally got an army together and I'd painted it, I had put it all together, I built this nice army and everything looked absolutely fantastic on the table, the green horde about to swarm over everything that was coming in front of them, and the rules had changed, a new faction was out and the latest knight in shining armour faction obliterated everything I'd spent the last 7 or 8 months building and basically rendered the whole thing a bit pointless and very difficult to play a competitive game. Finally, of course, when everything did align and I was able to build an army, the rules hadn't changed, I finally had a decent force to field on my dinner table. There was no one to actually play against. Everyone that I knew had moved on to other, more different types of gaming or out of gaming altogether. And so money, time and availability of players were the three things that always presented such a challenge for miniatures gaming, and slowly but surely led to me eventually, after many years, coming across P&P wargames, Hex and Counter wargames. Now, for the last few months, I've slowly but surely been rediscovering my love of miniatures wargaming, and particular print and play miniatures wargaming, which is a thing, and I had no idea this was a thing until relatively recently, and it's, I think, a solution to all three of those problems. And so what I'm going to do today on this video is I'm going to show some games that I think are perfect for people who want to get into miniature gaming. They're not sure if it's the thing for them. Maybe it is too expensive, it's too time consuming, maybe they just don't have anyone to play against. And so some of these games I'm going to show now are cheap, they are relatively straightforward to play, and you can play them solo or at least get a supplement in order to be able to play them solo. So let's start with a game I've played a few times over the last few months, and that game is Battlespace, ultra-modern solo skirmish game. It's designed by Robert Salters, who runs Table Salt Gaming Design. It's available, I think it's kind of like, I don't think it's available as a book as such, I think you can only get it print and play. And what it is it's set during a fictional Middle Eastern type conflict, and you have this book, this set of paper here is the only rules you need, and it's designed to use any miniatures that you have lying around. Now maybe if you're like me, you do have some older miniatures from many years ago, maybe you've got some building block toys you haven't played with since you're in your early 30s lying around, and you can just field anything you've got to play this game. It doesn't have to be the modern combat that you've got here. There's a Vietnam fan-made version floating around on the internet somewhere. There's also the ability to just repurpose the rules with your favourite science fiction models. And the way it works is you have a set of cards, and basically you have these 4 different types of cards here, and you have your own sort of unit or group of like 4 special forces type soldiers, and you equip them with different equipments. That's upside down, but different equipment, and you then face off against some enemies. We have sort of an enemy soldier there, and those enemies are controlled by AI cards. And so basically you have an AI driven bot that you can field your miniatures against, and the only thing you need to provide in addition to those rules realistically is a set of dice, because all the measurements, all the the usual kind of tape measure and various other things that you need, templates that you need in these sorts of games, are all covered by this single card here, which does the arc of fire, it does the movement, and all sorts of other things as well. And it's a really neat game. You just need to pick up the rule set from one of the places it's available at. There are a few of them online. There's a link to one of them in the description, and you can just play this game really quickly, really easy, without too much effort, and it is a lot of fun to play solo. Dedicated solo game. The next game I'm going to feature is a game that is very, very similar to the game that I used to play when I was younger and first playing these games, and that game is called Grimdark Future. And Grimdark Future, I have here the rules for the slightly smaller of the two versions, which is Grimdark Future Firefight. So those of you who play better known Grimdark space games will probably be well aware of what game this is similar to. And basically what's special about this is the rules are on this piece of paper. And while you can go and buy the more complex, more advanced rules for the game, which come as sort of a thicker book type purchase, everything you need is on this piece of paper to get started, and this is free. You just download it from the one-page rules website, which is where this is from, and that is the basics of the entire game, and it's very, very similar to that better known Grim Space game. Of course, you do need some factions, and so available for free as well on the website is the faction pages that you would need to fight those battles, whether that's the bigger game or the smaller skirmish game, which obviously GDF Firefight is. This is the Robot Legions versus the Eternal Dynasty. It's the Tau versus the Necrons, if you know anything about that sort of thing. And that's it. That's all you need. And you can just field those figures that you've got. Maybe if you're anything like me, those figures were made obsolete by rule changes in other games. You can then field these factions and have battles with the models that you currently have without the need to go and rebuild and spend another fortune on expensive models, because you can just use what you've got. Now, of course, if you do wish to buy the models, I believe there are 3D printed models specifically for the game these days. It seems to be expanding beyond its P&P roots, but they are there. Should you wish to do that. The potential, though, is that you're brand new to manage the game completely. You don't have any terrain, you don't have any figures to play. Well, that's the other great thing about Grimdark Future, is that they do have their own paper miniatures. And so those two factions here, again, completely for free, is a range of these smaller miniatures. Miniatures available for the game, and they're just made out of paper and just use these figures instead of your plastic models, which is just fantastic. I mean, you can get other factions. You do typically have to buy them, obviously, download them, but they're like a few quid for a sheet of miniatures, and they're very quick to put together. So, you know, there's the whole time thing, the repurposing your own model thing, paper miniatures, if you know, and you can have a game very similar to that much more well-known game, which takes a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time to build up the army worth playing, and that's just fantastic. And they even do terrain for it as well. So here's a little wall that you can hide your figures behind, and you can have the whole tabletop set up just like in a bigger war game with all the plastic. But let's imagine for a moment that you don't really want to play anything quite so grim or quite so dark, but you still like your relatively identifiable science fiction IP. And that's where a company called Sundered Vault come in. And this game here is called Game Over Man, which is a pixelated, cartoony style war game, which is basically aliens, and you control a small group of aliens, of space marines, not space marines, but marines in space, and you fight these little battles with these alien hordes which come at you from different directions. There's different type of aliens, and again they have these kind of really cool miniatures, and you just have this kind of cartoony appearance rather than that much more grim kind of futuristic thing that you might see in some of the other games. Now, I've shown Game Over Man because this is a dedicated solo game. It is quite good fun. Sundered Vault do other games as well, and the one that's most close to that well-known science fiction war game is called Nova's Crusade. Now, there's not a solo version for that as far as I know, but Game Over Man is dedicated solo. And they do, the company Sundered Vault, that is, they do miniatures in that pixelated style for all sorts of fantasy figures. They do it for historical war armies. They do the smaller scale armies where you move them in a line at a time. They do all sorts of things in that pixelated style. It's a really fun way of representing the armies on the battlefield if you don't really go in for that Grimdark stuff. And that lends me to the next topic, which is how do you get the stuff that goes with all these games? You can get the rule sets online. I mean, our rule sets do normally come in these great big books. This is one I've not played, but it's supposed to be pretty good. There is a solo supplement, I think, for this one, but I've not played this myself. But you can get PDF versions of those big rule books, and you then just have to supply your own miniatures. And there are companies out there that just do paper miniatures, so you can get your PDF, you can get then some miniatures, and what I have here is a half assembled set of soldiers from Antohammer Wargaming, I think it's called, and it's basically a sheet of figures that you cut out, put on a paper base, and that's your army. And this particular company has just started branching out into terrain, and so you have sort of the beginnings of a sort of a graveyard thing, should you wish to go more into horror type gaming. This one is from another company whose name completely escapes me, but you can get all the trees and all sorts. It's fantastic. And so you can have very quickly basically a game board, much like you'd have in a more traditional plastic setting, but completely out of paper and card that you make out of. And that's just, you know, for me, that's just fantastic. It's so much easier to do that than it is to go and buy mountains of plastic, which of course is you've then got to get rid of or store, or, you know, and it's just it's so much more easy for me personally. But of course, what P&P doesn't necessarily do quite so well is the whole modelling aspect of miniatures gaming. There is that element of painting and putting together your own models and building something that you then play on, which is not so easily catered for with the print and play side of things. I mean, I'm coming from it from a more of a gaming point of view. For all my love of print and play, my crafting ability is not great, but there is an element to the paper miniatures which comes close to that. And I'd just like to show you something from a company called Graffam Models, and this is a house that you can build, and you can build entire towns using models like this. Take the spun text back out, put together. The dormer window there is falling off where I haven't put enough glue on it. My crafting skills are subpar, as you can probably tell. But this, again, this is obviously slightly more commercial than some of the other things that I might have shown you earlier. But this particular model is available for free, like a trial, a starter thing over on various websites, and it comes with the ability to change the decor. So you have like a PDF, and in the PDF is 7 or 8, 9 different layers that you can add or change or mix and match as you see fit, and you can literally build 10 different versions of this model and have a town made out of this one model, and it's for free at the moment. And of course you can then have multiple other buildings, sci-fi, fantasy type buildings, and you have these entire towns, just like you can with the plastic miniatures building and the more old-fashioned style of making models. You can do it all in that style of paper and card building, which is, again, is fantastic. And so you can get both sides catered for. So that then is my 15-minute sales pitch on why P&P Miniatures Wargaming is really cool. It's something I'm just getting into. Hopefully I can feature more of the games that I've shown you on the channel in more of a gameplay type video, but that will have to see as time goes by and how things progress, because I'm just getting into this myself, as I said, and certainly does seem to be a solution to all those challenges I had over the years with miniatures gaming in its more typical sense. And one thing I've got to mention, I've shown you sci-fi and fantasy. You can of course get all this stuff with the historical World War II and other historical wargaming element as well. It's not just sci-fi and fantasy that's available. That's my personal interest when it comes to minis gaming, but you can also get all the historical factions, historical buildings, Napoleonics, all sorts of things in this paper miniatures, paper wargaming style. Okay, that is it. I will hopefully feature some more of this sort of game in the future, as I just said, but for now I will end the video here, and I will hopefully see you next time.